My name is Daniel Carter. For over a decade, I believe our family was unbreakable. I worked long hours as a regional sales manager in a thriving company in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I trusted my wife, Jessica, implicitly. Together, we built a comfortable life, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, weekend barbecues, and a loving daughter whose laughter filled every room. I never questioned the routines that made our life seem perfect. Until one day, everything changed. IT began on a typical Tuesday. I was at work, buried under reports and endless meetings, when a subtle thought tugged at me, a small feeling of unease that I couldn't shake. Jessica had told me that she'd been working late at the office to help finalize a big project. I believed her. After all, she was always supportive, always caring. But that day, as I reviewed my emails during a brief lull, I received a text from a neighbor. The message was simple and vague. I saw someone at your place again today. He was leaving around 6:30. At first, I dismissed it as a mistake. Neighbors sometimes notice random visitors, right? But later that afternoon, when I checked the security camera footage of our front porch from the previous evening, my stomach churned. The grainy video clearly showed a dark sedan parked outside our house. And, most alarmingly, Jessica seen laughing warmly with a man I didn't recognize. His features were hidden in the shadows, but his confident posture and the way she looked at him were unmistakable signs of intimacy. I spent that evening with a heavy heart, replaying the footage over and over in my mind. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just a friend from work, a co-worker who stopped by for a quick favor. Jessica had mentioned once that her office had a friendly culture, where colleagues sometimes dropped by after hours. But now, the evidence didn't add up. The laughter, the lingering hug, the discreet glances, they all painted a picture that went far beyond casual neighborly visits. When I got home that night, I found Jessica in the living room. The lights were dim, and our daughter was asleep in her room. I tried to keep my tone neutral as I asked, "Jess, who was that man outside yesterday evening?" Her eyes widened for a split second, then darted away. "Oh, that's just Mike from accounting," she said softly. "He needed to discuss some figures, and you know how he can be persistent." I didn't know what to say. Her answer was too rehearsed, too convenient. Something in her voice, a hint of nervousness, betrayed her calm facade, and I spent the rest of the night in restless silence. Every detail of that day, every memory of Jessica's evasive answers, gnawed at me. I felt as if my perfect world was slipping away, and with it, the trust that I had built my entire life upon. The image of Jessica laughing with that stranger haunted me. My heart, once full of love and gratitude, began to fill with a cold, burning anger. I knew deep down that I had to uncover the truth. Determined, I set out to gather more evidence. I spent the following days discreetly checking our home security footage, cross-referencing the timestamps with Jessica's alibis. I took note of every unusual visit, every instance when she was unexpectedly absent during evenings. With every piece of evidence, the picture grew clearer. While I was at work, Jessica had been bringing home a co-worker, one who wasn't just a casual visitor, but someone with whom she shared moments of intimacy. The realization struck me hard one night as I sat alone in my study. I opened a file I'd been compiling, a digital dossier filled with snapshots from the security camera, messages I'd overheard, and a log of every late return. Each detail confirmed the worst. My wife had been cheating, and not just once or twice, but repeatedly over the past few months. I felt betrayed on a scale I'd never known. Every lie that I had trusted, every promise we'd made, now lay in ruins that I vowed that I would not let this betrayal stand unpunished. My heart pounded with a mixture of sorrow and rage, and as I held back tears, I resolved that when the time came, I would confront Jessica and the man she'd been seeing, with a force so cold and unyielding that they would regret every stolen moment. That night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I planned my next steps in hushed determination. I would gather every shred of evidence, and I would prepare myself, physically and mentally, for the retribution I was determined to exact. The following week was a haze of clandestine investigation and mounting paranoia. I transformed from the trusting husband I once was into a man driven by a relentless need for truth and revenge. Every night, after work, I returned home earlier than usual, positioning myself to catch any glimpse of a secret visitor. I began to record every detail in a private journal. The exact times Jessica left the house, the long hours when the security camera showed unfamiliar activity, and even overheard snippets of conversation that hinted at more than just friendly visits. I hired a discreet private investigator to follow the trail. The investigator's findings were damning. Jessica wasn't merely hosting a casual co-worker. She had been meeting with a man named Michael, a supposedly minor figure at her office, on a regular basis. The investigator produced photos taken from a distance. Jessica laughing warmly with Michael in our front yard, sharing a tender embrace, and even moments when their hands lingered together as if reluctant to let go. The evidence was overwhelming, and with each passing day, my anger and heartbreak deepened at work. I became increasingly distracted. My colleagues noticed that I was quieter than usual, my eyes darkened with something I couldn't quite explain. I kept my emotions locked away, focusing on the spreadsheets and reports, even as my mind replayed the images of my wife's betrayal. The more I learned, the more I felt that the perfect family I'd built was nothing but a facade, a delicate structure built on lies that was now collapsing under the weight of its own deceit. Late one evening, after our daughter had gone to bed and the house fell into a heavy silence, I confronted Jessica. "Tell me the truth," I demanded, my voice steady but laced with an intensity that shocked even me. "Why is Michael coming to our home? What are you doing?" Her face went pale, and for a long, painful moment, she said nothing. Finally, in a trembling whisper, she replied, "It's just a friend from work." "You don't understand. I needed someone to talk to help me cope with stress." Her words were feeble, and they rang hollow in the echo of the evidence I collected. I pressed on, laying out everything I knew. I showed her the photos, the video clips, the detailed logs of every suspicious visit. With each piece of evidence, her facade crumbled further. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain, but every word was drowned by the overwhelming truth. I felt a cold resolve solidifying inside me, a promise that I would not be the passive sufferer of her betrayal. That night, as I sat alone in the dark with the remnants of our shattered life before me, I made a vow. I would not let this betrayal go unanswered. I would gather every scrap of evidence. And when the time came, I would confront not only Jessica but also Michael, the man who had intruded into our home and shattered my trust. I would do so not with mere words, but with a physical retribution that would leave no doubt. Betrayal would be repaid in blood. I end the days that followed. I plunged headfirst into a relentless pursuit of the truth. My home became both a fortress and a prison. As I set up hidden cameras and recorded every movement around our property, I spent countless hours reviewing the footage. Every night, I saw Jessica and Michael sharing secretive smiles, lingering touches, and moments of intimacy that I had never imagined. The once sacred sanctuary of our home now felt like a stage for deception, and every stolen moment was a bitter reminder of my shattered trust. I took to the gym as well, channeling my burgeoning rage into every workout. The clanging of weights and the rhythmic pounding of the punching bag became my daily meditation, each blow a silent promise of retribution. I trained with ferocity that was both cathartic and terrifying, transforming my grief into raw physical strength. I knew that the day would come when I would have to confront Michael, and I needed to be ready, both mentally and physically. Late one night, after another grueling session at the gym, I sat in my car alone in a dark parking lot and reviewed the latest footage on my laptop. The evidence was irrefutable. There was a pattern, a ritual betrayal that had persisted for months. I could see Jessica's eyes light up every time Michael arrived, a look of longing and secret delight that stung more than any harsh word could. The realization was like a knife twisting in my gut that I began planning a confrontation. I didn't just want answers. I wanted to deliver retribution. I drafted a plan to catch them in the act. I arranged to follow Michael when he next visited our home. Every minute, every second was logged meticulously in my journal. I knew that I had to be patient. The perfect moment would come, and then I would strike. During the day, while Jessica pretended that nothing was wrong, I set my trap. I planted a small voice recorder in the living room and ensured the cameras were active. My heart pounded with every tick of the clock, each one echoing the promise of impending justice. The burden of betrayal weighed on me heavily, and I vowed that I would not stop until every stolen moment was avenged. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the house fell into its familiar silence, Michael arrived. Just as I had predicted, I watched in the shadows as he entered the house, his presence confirmed by the discreet beep of the security system. Every fiber of my being trembled with anticipation and anger. That night, as I observed their secret meeting through the lens of my hidden cameras, the image of Jessica laughing softly and touching Michael's hand was a searing blow to my soul. The truth was undeniable. My perfect family was nothing but a lie, and the time for retribution had come. With the evidence complete and the trap set, I knew there was no turning back. The next day, after gathering my final proofs, I prepared for the confrontation that I had been building towards for weeks. I knew that a quiet conversation wouldn't suffice. This was a betrayal that demanded a physical reckoning. I resolved that the moment had come to confront Michael, and if necessary, to make sure that Jessica understood the depth of my fury. Late that night, while our daughter slept and the house lay shrouded in darkness, I crept silently through the halls. I moved with a determination that belied the storm raging inside me. I entered the living room and found Michael alone, reviewing documents on his laptop, unaware that the trap had been sprung. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stepped forward. "Michael," I said, my voice low and controlled, "we need to talk." His eyes shot up in surprise. There was a moment of frozen silence as he tried to process what was happening. I didn't give him a chance to speak. In that instant, the culmination of months of betrayal and heartache exploded into violence. I lunged, fists flying with the force of all the lies that had been fed to me. The fight was brutal, a melee of raw emotion and physical power. Michael tried to defend himself, his face contorting with both fear and defiance, but my anger was an unyielding tide. Every blow I delivered was a declaration. I would not let this betrayal go unpunished. I drove him back against the wall, my knuckles bloody and my eyes burning with a mixture of grief and vengeance. As he crumpled under barrage of my strikes, I forced him to listen to my words. Every lie you told, every secret you kept will be repaid in full. The confrontation was as much for me as it was for him. I wanted to make sure that everyone involved knew the price of betrayal. With Michael subdued and bleeding on the cold floor, I left him there as a grim reminder that I would not rest until every act of deceit was exposed and every traitor made to suffer. I stormed out of the house, heart pounding, knowing that this was only the beginning. Outside, the rain began to fall, as if nature itself wept for the family I had once known. I drove home in a haze, my mind a tumult of fury and sorrow. I knew that the retribution was far from over. I would confront Jessica next, forcing her to face the truth of her actions. And as I merged onto the dark highway that night, every raindrop was a promise that the cycle of betrayal would not end until every stolen moment was avenged. In the aftermath of that violent night, our home became a landscape of shattered dreams and silent despair. Jessica's once bright eyes were now haunted by regret and fear, and our daughter's innocent laughter was overshadowed by the tension that gripped every room. I spent long, sleepless nights reviewing every piece of evidence, every hidden camera recording that bore witness to the betrayal that had dismantled our family. My quest for retribution had transformed me into a man I barely recognized, a man whose soul was scarred by the cost of trust broken beyond repair. Each day, as I walked through our halls, I felt the weight of every lie pressing on me. I began to reach out to others who had suffered similar betrayals, gathering their stories as if they were pieces of a larger puzzle of vengeance. The more I learned, the more I realized that this wasn't just about one affair. It was a systemic betrayal that had corrupted everything I once held dear. I continued my training with a relentless intensity. Every session at the gym a bitter reminder of the physical toll of retribution. My muscles ached with every punch thrown, and every bruise became a symbol of the battle I was forced to fight. Yet, as I looked in the mirror, I could see the toll that this path had taken on me. My eyes, once filled with hope, were now hardened with the cold determination of an avenger. One stormy night, as I sat in the dim glow of our living room with the evidence spread out before me, I realized that there was no going back. I had made my choice to expose every lie, to make every traitor pay the ultimate price. I planned one final confrontation, a reckoning that would force Jessica and everyone involved to face the consequences of their deceit. I called her into the living room, my voice steady as I laid out the last pieces of damning evidence. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I saw the woman I once loved flicker in them. But that moment was fleeting. The damage was done, and the perfect family we had built was now nothing but ruins as I delivered my final ultimatum, that if she ever attempted to hide another secret, if she ever tried to mend the shattered facade with lies, I could see the silent promise of retribution in her eyes. I left her there in the silence, knowing that I had reclaimed a piece of the honor that had been stolen from me. I end the days that followed. I drove alone on rain-soaked highways, the storm outside echoing the turmoil within. Every mile was a reminder that the price of betrayal is eternal, and that an avenger must continue on a dark, lonely path until every lie is exposed and every traitor pays the ultimate cost. I merged onto a freeway with nothing left but the memories of a perfect family now shattered and a cold, unyielding resolve to see justice done. In a world where trust was broken, I had become both the collector and the executioner of the debt that betrayal incurred. And as the storm raged on outside, I silently vowed that I would continue this fight until every secret was laid bare and every stolen moment was avenged. No matter cost, I couldn't shake the image of that familiar car pulling into our driveway while I was at work. Every day since I discovered the truth, my wife, Melissa, had been inviting her co-worker, Mark, into our home. I felt the cold grip of betrayal tighten around my chest. The evidence was undeniable. The security footage, the hushed phone calls, the lingering smiles that spoke volumes. It was a secret I had not chosen, yet one that now defined every waking moment. After our explosive confrontation that night, the silence at home became almost unbearable. Melissa's eyes were hollow. The warmth we once shared was gone. I had stormed through our conversation with words laced in venom, demanding answers I knew she couldn't give. Yet even as I delivered my ultimatum, tell me the truth or I won't let this lie go unpunished, a part of me wondered if I was already losing the man I used to be. I had transformed, almost imperceptibly, from a loving husband into an avenger whose every thought was dominated by the need to reclaim his honor. I end the days that followed. I turned my home into a silent archive of evidence. I installed additional cameras, tracking every move in our living room and entryway. I logged the exact times Melissa left the house, noting each instance when she wasn't around to share the routine of our family life. Each evening when I reviewed the footage, the images of her laughing with Mark, her head tilted in secret delight, burned into my memory. I even printed out screenshots, pinning them to the wall in a private study that became my war room at AT work. My colleagues noticed a change. The friendly, optimistic Daniel they once knew was replaced by a man whose eyes were dark and distant, whose words were clipped. I kept my emotions locked away, burying them beneath the daily grind of reports and meetings. But behind closed doors, my mind was a battlefield, and every minute I wasn't with my family, I was plotting my next move. I began to research Mark more thoroughly. What I found unsettled me further. Mark wasn't just a casual acquaintance or a harmless co-worker. He had gradually become a regular fixture at our home. Neighbors mentioned seeing him lingering around our backyard long after the usual office hours. A friend from the gym, who'd once complimented Melissa on her friendly nature, confirmed in hushed tones that Mark was known for his flirtatious manner. Each revelation fed my growing resolve that this betrayal would not end with whispers and furtive glances. It demanded a reckoning. One particularly gray afternoon, I received an anonymous tip, a message that warned me to stop digging or face consequences. Instead of deterring me, it only reinforced the gravity of the situation. I realized then that Melissa's secret wasn't isolated. It was part of a larger pattern of deception that extended deeper than I'd ever suspected. The thought that others might be involved, that my wife might have even more hidden liaisons, was both terrifying and galvanizing. I resolved to follow every lead, no matter how dark or dangerous it became. That night, while the rain tapped steadily against the window, I sat in my study reviewing my meticulously compiled dossier. Each page told a story of broken trust in clandestine meetings, a narrative of lies that spanned months, even years. I remembered how our daughter once clung to me with innocent adoration, and I recalled the promise I made to protect our family. Now, that promise felt shattered, and all I had left was a drive to reclaim what had been stolen from me. The decision crystallized as I gazed at a photograph of Melissa and Mark, captured on a hidden camera during one of their secret encounters. My heart pounded with a mixture of sorrow and an almost feral determination. I knew what I had to do next. I needed to confront Mark directly, not merely to demand the truth, but to make him understand that the pain of betrayal would be repaid in full. I began planning a meeting, a confrontation that would leave no room for denial. I contacted a friend who worked in security to help me track Mark's movements more closely and to ensure that I would have backup if things turned violent. In the following days, I shadowed Mark's routine with a precision that bordered on obsession. I followed him to a local sports bar where he met with friends after work, and I discreetly captured every moment of his behavior. I even managed to record snippets of conversation that hinted at his relationship with Melissa, snatches of laughter, the casual use of endearments that no one should use in a professional setting. Every detail confirmed what my heart already knew. While I labored faithfully at work, my wife had been giving herself over to Mark, a man who had infiltrated our home and our lives like a slow poison point one night. As I drove home under the dark sky punctuated by flashes of lightning, I felt a grim resolve settling over me. The road ahead was uncertain, paved with the ruins of a family I once cherished. But I had become an avenger, a man defined by betrayal, and determined to collect the price of every stolen moment. I knew that the confrontation with Mark was inevitable, and I prepared myself for the moment when I would force both him and Melissa to face the consequences of their actions. With each mile on that rain-slick highway, I vowed silently, no matter how deep the lies ran, no matter how many secrets were buried in the dark corners of our home, I would see this through. I would not let betrayal be the final word in our story. I would reclaim my honor, even if it meant tearing down everything in my path. As the city lights blurred into a stormy haze, I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my heart pounding in rhythm with the rain. My life had changed irreversibly, and as I merged onto the freeway, I knew that my journey of retribution was far from over. The path ahead was dark and dangerous, but I was ready to face it head-on, no longer as a passive victim, but as a man who would let no lie go unpunished.